Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a literary style where the line between reality and fantasy gets really blurry. So, let's jump right in.
So picture this. You're reading a novel, and you come across this sentence. It's describing a trickle of blood that has a mind of its own, navigating a house and a street all by itself. It's completely impossible, right? But the way it's written, it sounds as normal as describing someone making a cup of coffee.
So you have to ask, what kind of mind comes up with something like that? Well, the answer isn't just a wild imagination. It's a style of writing that was born from a reality that was often stranger, more violent, and way more surreal than any story you could ever make up.
To really get a handle on the magic in what we call magical realism, you first have to understand the real world it came from. And that means looking at the absolutely chaotic, almost unbelievable history of Colombia and Latin America.
Think about this for a second. For over 50 years, starting in the 1960s, Colombia was tangled up in a near-constant state of civil war. It was a conflict that simmered and boiled over for basically an entire lifetime.
And the human cost, it was just staggering. We're talking more than 200,000 people who died. So here's the really crucial point. For generations of people, this backdrop of unpredictable violence wasn't some shocking interruption to daily life. It was daily life.
And out of all this instability, you get these real-life figures whose power and actions were honestly more unbelievable than any fictional villain you could dream up. Take Pablo Escobar. At his peak in 1989, his estimated net worth was $30 billion. That's like $60 billion in today's money. This is a guy who was so obscenely wealthy that, according to the stories, he once burned $2 million in cash just to keep his daughter from getting cold while they were hiding out.
And this kind of thing wasn't just happening in Colombia. Across the entire region, you had leaders operating on a logic that it defied all reason. I mean, when your reality includes a government killing all the black dogs to find a political enemy or putting red cellophane on streetlights to stop a disease, the line between what's rational and what's absurd basically disappears.
So with all of this absolute insanity as the backdrop, who could possibly take that chaos and turn it into something legendary? Well, it would have to be someone who didn't just live through it, but who was almost perfectly built to tell its story.
And that brings us to the man himself, Gabriel García Márquez, or Gabo, as pretty much everyone knew him. He grew up in a household that was the perfect melting pot for creating his one-of-a-kind view of the world. You see, his whole perspective was shaped by these two completely opposite yet somehow coexisting forces. On one side, you had his grandfather, a war veteran who told him the hard, gritty stories of war and politics, the facts. But then you had his grandmother, who would talk about ghosts and omens with such a deadpan, matter-of-fact tone. She made the supernatural feel totally normal, just another part of the day.
So you take that childhood and you combine it with the surreal history of his homeland, and what do you get? You get all the ingredients he needed to write his masterpiece.
See, the thing is, Gabo didn't invent some new kind of fantasy. He was just reporting on a reality that was already fantastical. In his books, a woman floating up to heaven is described with the same plain language as someone washing the dishes. That river of blood we started with, it's just treated as a fact. The magic isn't the point. The reality is the point.
So let's just break it down. You've got the foundation, that crazy, surreal history of Latin America. Then you've got the lens he saw it through, a mix of his grandfather's hard facts and his grandmother's casual magic. And when you put it all together, you get the synthesis, a novel that wasn't an escape from reality, but was actually a deeper, more honest way of looking at it.
So why does any of this matter? Why are we still talking about it? Well, because with this style, Márquez did so much more than just write a famous book.
He essentially gave an entire continent its own literary voice. He showed the world that Latin America's story didn't need to be explained or tidied up to fit into a neat, rational European box. It could be told on its own unbelievable, messy, and magical terms. And really, who could say it better than the man himself? He suggested that his biggest inspiration wasn't some ancient mythology. It was just the world he saw right outside his window, a world where the impossible just kind of happened every day.
And that really leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? Maybe magical realism isn't just some literary genre from a far-off place and time. Maybe it's a reminder that the line between what we call real and what we call magical is much, much thinner than we think.
Okay, let's dive into 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. It's, one of the most celebrated novels ever. But it's also famous for being, well, a little difficult. You've got this massive, sprawling family tree and this weird mix of magic and reality. But don't worry about any of that. In this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We're going to unravel the core mysteries and show you exactly why this story is so incredibly powerful. And it all starts with the legendary first sentence, which, believe it or not, kind of contains the entire book in miniature.
I mean, seriously, everything you need to know about this book is packed right into this one opening line. It's amazing. So it starts with a man, right at the moment he's about to die, and he's flashing back to this moment of pure childhood wonder. The story isn't moving in a straight line, it's a circle. It pulls the future right into the past from the very first sentence. It's basically setting the stage for this huge story about memory, about fate, and about cycles that nobody can seem to escape.
So let's get into the birth of Macondo. It's a town that was literally founded because of a single terrifying fear. The story kicks off with the Buendia family, and they started this town, Macondo, basically to run away from a ghost and a really terrible curse.
So, what is this Buendia curse? Well, at the very heart of the family is this deep-seated taboo. See, the founders, José Arcadio Buendia and his wife Ursula Iguarán, they were first cousins, and they were absolutely terrified of this curse, this belief that their child would be born with a pig's tail. I'm not kidding. They were so scared that they didn't even consummate their marriage for a long, long time. And this single fear, it just haunts every single generation that comes after them.
So, to escape a ghost that's haunting them and the weight of that curse, José Arcadio decides they have to leave. He basically leads his family and a few others on this epic journey through the jungle, and what they found is Macondo. You have to picture it as this perfect, utopian village, completely isolated from the rest of the world. It's like their own private Eden where time just seems to stand still. In fact, in the beginning, it's a place so new that the book says no one had yet died. Just imagine that.
All right, let's talk more about this Buendia family curse because it's the engine of the whole story. We're talking about 7 generations who are all basically trapped in this repeating cycle of names and, well, fates. This curse haunts the family for a solid 100 years, and a big part of it is how they keep giving their children the same names over and over. And by doing that, they pretty much doom them to live out the same tragic lives as the people who came before them.
And this is where a lot of people get tripped up, but it's so important. To really get what's going on, you have to decode the names. See, almost all the men are named either José Arcadio or Aureliano. But these aren't just names, okay? They're like character blueprints, they're archetypes. The José Arcadios are always impulsive, they're strong, they're driven by these worldly desires. Then you have the Aurelianos. They're the solitary, quiet, withdrawn ones, more intellectual and curious. So every single generation becomes this new battleground between these two opposing forces, these two sides of the family's soul.
And all of this happens in this world of Macondo, where magic is just part of the scenery. This is where that famous style magical realism really comes to life. In Macondo, the most impossible things are treated as totally ordinary. Like an insomnia plague hits the town, and the big deal isn't that nobody can sleep, it's that they start forgetting everything. Or yellow butterflies just appear whenever a forbidden love is near. You've got a priest who levitates just by drinking hot chocolate, and a woman who's so beautiful she just ascends into heaven, and nobody questions it. The fantastic is just woven right into the fabric of their everyday lives.
But of course, Macondo's perfect isolation couldn't last forever. The outside world eventually finds it, and it intrudes in these 3 big waves. First, you have the gypsies. They show up with all these incredible inventions, like magnets and ice, sparking this sense of wonder and curiosity. Then, the government shows up, and with it comes order, laws, and politics, which leads to war. And finally, the big one. An American banana company arrives, and that brings a bit of progress at first, but then it brings a whole lot of violence.
3,000. That's the estimated number of striking banana company workers who were massacred by the army, all because they were protesting their working conditions. This moment is really the historical heart of the novel. It's based on a real-life atrocity, but what's truly chilling is what happens after. The massacre is just erased, completely and systematically wiped from the official history. The government denies it ever happened, and the entire town of Macondo is basically forced into a kind of collective amnesia.
And that brings us to the real meaning of solitude in this book. Because the title, 100 Years of Solitude, it's not really about being physically alone. No, it's about a profound, almost corrosive inability to truly love. When you get right down to it, the real curse of the Buendia family isn't the pig's tail, it's their solitude. And by solitude, the book means this profound lack of love and solidarity that completely isolates every single family member. They're all so trapped inside their own heads, their own obsessions and pride, that they can't genuinely connect with anyone else. And it's this emotional isolation that dooms them, preventing them from ever learning from their ancestors' mistakes and forcing them to repeat them over and over again.
So the big question is, how does this curse of solitude, this inability to love, end up destroying not just an entire family, but their whole world?
While the end of Macondo is like a domino effect of apocalyptic events, it really starts with the trauma of the Banana Massacre. After that, a great rain begins, and it doesn't stop for 4 years, 11 months, and 2 days, basically washing away the town's prosperity and its memory. Then, as everything falls apart, the final Orellano in the family line finally deciphers these old gypsy parchments. And as he reads, he makes this chilling discovery. The parchments contain the entire history of his family, right up to the very moment he is reading them. The end is already written, and a hurricane is coming to erase the town from existence. And the prophecy is fulfilled in the most ironic way possible. The family's 100-year cycle ends with a genuine act of love, but it's also an act of incest. The last 2 surviving family members fall in love, and from that love, the long-feared child with the tail of a pig is finally born. The very curse they fled from, the thing that started their story, is exactly how it ends.
So why does this bizarre, magical, and frankly tragic story matter so much? Why is it considered such a masterpiece? It's because the story of Macondo isn't just about one fictional family in a world without second chances. It's really an allegory for the history of an entire continent.
Yeah, García Márquez uses Macondo as a powerful symbol for Latin American history. The town's hopeful beginning is like the founding of a new world. The endless civil wars mirror the region's long history of political conflict. The Banana Company stands in for foreign exploitation. And maybe most importantly, the massacre and the fact that it was completely erased from memory. That speaks to the violent histories that have been deliberately forgotten or denied across the continent. And this is the novel's final, absolutely crushing line. As the last Orellano finishes reading the prophecy that foretold his own life, a hurricane literally wipes Macondo off the map, just as it was written. The message is heartbreakingly clear. Races, or families, or people who are condemned to 100 years of solitude, who can't love and can't remember their past, they don't get a second chance on Earth.
And so the novel leaves all of us with a really important question, one that goes way beyond the pages of the book. If we are really destined to repeat the histories we can't remember, then what are the stories we absolutely must fight to keep from being erased in our own world? What memories are we in danger of losing, and what's the cost if we let them just disappear?